Hello everyone and welcome along to another tutorial. This week I'm going to be continuing the theme of flowers and I'm going to show you another really easy technique that you can do to create the most wonderful flowers. So let's get started. So this is the type of flower we're going to be creating today, nice and loose and full of energy. I'm going to be using my primary colours. I work all my tutorials with a core of 3 primary colours, Quinacradome magenta, Phthalo blue and Hansa yellow, and I supplement that with Friends Grey and burnt sienna. If you'd like to know more about the 3 essential colours, click over to my video just above and find out why I use them. So back to our flower. So I've got my sheet of A5 cold press watercolour paper at the ready, and I'm just going to mix up a little bit of my beautiful vibrant Quinacradome magenta. A little puddle of that, not too thick, not too thin, something like a milky consistency. That's what we're looking for. I'm then going to dry my brush off. I don't want too much water for this flower, so I'm going to get rid of the excess water out of my brush, and I'm going to touch my brush down against the paper. I'm going to push it down so it's got full contact and flick it up. Initially, we don't want too many marks. You want to get texture into your brush mark. So here we go again. Push down, dry brush and flick up to the side. I'm going to go again and add a little bit more colour. I'm going to pop a little bubble of paint in the bottom of the flower. I'm going to touch into that and flick up. Another little bead of paint, touch in and flick up. Getting that sense of energy and leaving some white space showing on the paper. Okay, I'm next going to mix up a green, and my favourite mixing of green is taking your grey. In my case it's Friends Grey, but you could use Paynes grey as well. Get some Paynes grey in a puddle and add some yellow. This gives you a wonderful natural looking green. So pick up a bit of my yellow, pop it into the grey, a little bit at a time until you get the green you want. I like mixing my own colour paints from these primary colours. It's a real fun way to work. I'm just going to make that a little bit creamier with a bit more pigment in there. Okay, lovely, nice green. And I'm going to start again by tapping in to the base of the flower. This is wet in wet now. The flower's still wet. I'm dropping that green in and allowing it to bleed into the petals, giving me that soft leaf-like shape. And then on the very tip of my brush, I'm going to touch in and come down for my stem. I'm going to do that again. It's a bit skinny, so I'm going to push down further and bring a nice stem down. Fabulous. And look back up at the flower. Look how that green is bleeding in with our beautiful vibrant pink. Now I want to add a little bit more interest, so I'm going to pick up some of my Hansa yellow. You could also use a lemon yellow. Popping that into a little puddle with some clean water. Quite wet this time because I want this to work wet on wet, so I'm going to drop some yellow in amongst that pink and let it bleed into the pink, giving me a variety of colours happening in my flower head. Fabulous. Can you see that bleeding away? Maybe add another little bit of pink back in as well, just flicking through, flicking that brush on its side to create that sense of movement. Just look at those colours. Wonderful. Now I want to soften it off a little bit, but before I do that, another tool that's really handy is something sharp. So I've got a little craft knife here, but you could just as easily actually use the end of a paint tube or a paper clip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to score into the flower. I'll use my tube of paint so you can see I'm going to scratch into the surface of the flower, or with a craft knife, or a paper clip, or a twig even. What's going to happen is you're going to see those lines appear in the petal. We've made grooves in the paper, and the paint, the wet paint, is going to sink into those grooves and give us these wonderful lines. Okay, now for softening things up a little bit, I'm going to come in to the edge of my flower, clean water on the paper. This bit's totally optional. You could love your flower just as it is. I'm going to come in with some water and let that flower, those flower petals, bleed down into the water. So you want to creep up on the flower, touch into the bit you want the paint to bleed from, and it will just soften off the edges of the flower and give it that another beautiful wispy look. I'm going to do the same at the top here. I'm going to come in from above with clean water, wiggle my brush until I touch into some wet paint, and let it bleed through into the water. Okay, now I'm going to bring my attention back to my green, and I want to darken the base of the flower. So just a couple of drops of that green, wet into wet. I'm going to drop it into the stem as well, wet into wet, and let that just bleed into the stem. Lovely. Let's add a leaf, shall we? Let's add a little simple leaf. So I'm going to pop off the side of the stem, pull down quite roughly again, and like we did with the flower, I'm going to take my craft knife and score down the middle of the leaf and score some veins in the petal. Wonderful. Okay, I'm happy with how that looks now. There are more things you can do to it by giving it another layer. So we're going to let that dry off. We're going to do another one in a different colour. Just so practice makes perfect. The more of these that you do, the easier they will become. I've got my magenta here, so I'm going to add some phthalo blue into my magenta, a little bit more magenta again. Get the colour that I want. You'll notice that from these primary colours I get the most fabulous purple colours. Again, first thing to do, dry off your brush on a piece of tissue. Get rid of all that water. We don't want too much water at the beginning. Then load the brush up just with the water in your palette. Press it against the paper and drag and flick your brush upwards in the direction that you would imagine these very soft petals to form. Almost a tulipy type shape. Let's have a petal coming out to the side as well, shall we? Fabulous. Then into my green again. Just going to mix it a bit stronger and pop in that green into the base of the flower and let it bleed on up. It's back to the tip of your brush and sweep down for your stem. That's quite nice, very delicate. And just pop that green where you want it. I'm going to go back into my purple again, make it a little bit creamier, and I'm going to go again, just touching my brush in above where that green is and touching the brush against the paper. You want a fair amount of the bristles against the paper, not too much water, and flick upwards, get that energy going. Next thing we're going to do is take our sharp object, be it a paper clip, be it a craft knife, or like I did earlier, the end of a paint tube. Perfect. And create some grooves in the paper. That's going to allow the paint to sink in and create really simple lines in your flower. Next thing to do is to soften the edges. Remember, this is totally optional, and I'm going to creep up with my water, creep up until I touch into the wet paint and get that little bloom, get that colour spilling out. I'm going to do some here. I like this leaf up the top, the petal, coming in with my clean water, touching in and softening off. adding the water allows those petals to kind of soften into the background and give you a kind of out of focus look to your work. Lovely. I'm going to do a little bit more work on my stem. So I'm going to move to a size 6 brush. I've been using a size 12 up to now. And I want to make this a little bit hairy. So I'm just flicking out from the side of that stem, a bit like a poppy that has a hairy stem. Just flicking out some of the paint that's already there to create my feathered stem. I kind of want a bit of a background on this one as well, and I love my yellow and purple. I don't like mixing yellow and purple because that will give you a grey. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of yellow here, add some water. I will just touch into the bottom of the flower, which is nearly dry already, and just give that hazy look, a nice little bit of yellow here and there. It's a complementary colour. It works really well against the purple. Just gives me another dynamic going on. Lots of water. Fade that colour out. A little bit of yellow underneath there. There we go. Flower number 2. Really quick and really straightforward. So here's our first flower. So what I want to show you quickly now is how, if you want to, you can go back in and add another layer, another wash of watercolour. I'm loving this purple one. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So I'm going to get some of my magenta again. Let me move my palette over so you can see my magenta. This is dry. You want your first layer to be dry. Not too much water on your brush again. I'm going to do exactly the same as I did before. Touch in. A little bit more pigment than that, Eunice. Here we go. Touch in and flick up. And those simple, very simple little marks really bring that vibrancy to life. Let me see if my purple one's dry enough for me to do the same on here. I think it is. In we go, just making my purple a little bit creamier. Oh, that's nice. Dry my brush off, come in again, and just add another layer of petals. Darker, and it's going to stand out. It's going to give you that sense of volume to your flowers. So some very simple flowers for you to have a try at. Please have a go at these at home, and if you want to try some other flowers, check out the video that I posted last week doing these very simple violet daisy type plants. So have fun. Most of all, enjoy your watercolour, and I'll be back with you soon. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Bye.